I'd like to then introduce you to your next speaker. So Jon Milles is the Chief Marketing Officer and Chief Product Officer of Demandbase. And he's responsible for delivering Demandbase's ABM platform and fulfilling its mission of transforming how B2B companies go to market. Jon was kind of co-founder and CEO of Engagio before that, and then co-founder of and CMO of Marketo. I think which was his first time in the spotlight. And then and he's gonna give us the complete guide to account-based experience. So without further ado, Jon, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Let me get my screen share happening here, and we will kick things off. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to present today the clear and complete guide to account-based experience. Many of you might have heard of account-based marketing. First things we're going to kind of help set up why am I talking about this thing of account-based experience. But first, indulge me a little bit more about just me personally. You're going to be hearing me talk for the next 45 minutes or so. So worth maybe getting to know me a bit. Sorry, but I said before I get to that, actually, the meat of this presentation is coming from my book that I published about 2 months ago, The Clear and Complete Guide to Account-Based Experience. 250 pages of advice and best practices. It's kind of a fun, easy read. You can grab it at demandbase.com/guide. So now a little bit more about me, as I said. You heard my quick introduction. I actually kind of got into tech through like an odd route. I studied physics for my undergraduate degree. I actually got into MIT to study, to get a PhD in physics. But I decided to try to just give this whole business world a try. I went to a consulting firm that specialized in sort of customer marketing consulting, if you will. And we actually had acquired and spun off a marketing technology company called Exchange. And so that sort of loose connection into MarTech is how I kind of got started. It's funny how careers evolve. I don't regret the fact I studied physics. I think that sort of quantitative, analytical way of thinking has helped me to be the marketer I am today. Another fun fact about me of no relevance is that I was born in Eritrea. When I was born in 1972, it was still Ethiopia. My parents, when people ask me, hey, why were you born in Ethiopia? I love to give the answer. It's because I wanted to be close to my parents. Speaking of parents, another, my last little kind of fun fact is I'm a dad. These are my 2 kids. And one of my, my sense of humor is I love to combine dad jokes with my kind of math and analytical background. So I'll be interspersing some math-oriented dad jokes throughout this presentation. So for example, 2 atoms were walking across the road and one of them explained, I think I lost an electron. The other one said, really? Are you sure? And the first atom said, yep, I'm absolutely positive. Hopefully you get that. Okay, so now let's get into the meat of the presentation. So as you heard, I was one of the co-founders of Marketo, and the original CMO. And at Marketo, I helped to build our demand generation engine. We really pioneered, in many ways, what kind of modern demand generation looked like, where we would use content and other inbound practices to generate leads. But what we didn't do is we wouldn't then send those leads to sales immediately. Instead, we would nurture them, develop them, and only send them to the sales team when they showed signs of actually being ready to talk to sales. And this was great for the sales team because they didn't have to talk to leads that didn't want to talk to them. And it was great for the customer because they didn't get unwanted sales calls. So it worked really, really well. But it wasn't enough. As we continued to scale towards the IPO and beyond, effectively, there's a limit to how much you can scale inbound. I I couldn't double our pipeline by doubling the number of blog posts that we wrote, for example. And so we started experimenting with other demand gen strategies or pipeline development strategies, including what became known today as account-based marketing, where we would reach out to target accounts proactively and try to engage with them. And it was frankly the challenges of doing that at Marketo, with Marketo as my tech stack, that inspired me to found Engagio, and then 5 years later to merge Engagio with Demandbase to form the leading account-based platform. But at the time, I used this analogy that seemed really effective to explain the difference between demand generation and account-based marketing. Demand generation is like fishing with a net. We'd run our campaigns and we wouldn't care which specific person got caught up in that net or company. We just cared if we got enough to then nurture and score. Whereas account-based marketing is more like fishing with a spear, where we identify the big fish and we go after them proactively. But inherent in this analogy, which was really effective to explain what ABM was all about, the flaw of ABM is built in that analogy. And that's effectively, it doesn't feel good to get poked by a spear. Just, it's kind of obvious. And I realized that the way most companies, including us, were practicing ABM had lost that respect for the customer experience that the demand generation had. We were reaching out to accounts that weren't interested in hearing from us, which wasn't great for the salespeople and really wasn't a good experience for the customer and the buyer. And thus was born the concept of account-based experience, or ABX. And effectively, ABX tries to combine the engageability, respect for the customer experience of traditional demand generation with the precision and targeting of account-based marketing. The other advantage of ABX, in the first point here, is that inherent in the name of account-based marketing is that it's just one department marketing. But as we've all learned over the last 5 or 6 years, to really effectively engage with accounts, it requires an orchestrated process that spans departments, marketing and sales, and SDRs, and even customer success. An account-based experience is a bigger tent that lets us bring all these accounts into it, all these departments into it. So that's what ABX is all about. So the rest of this presentation is going to focus on how do we do ABX. And there's really 5 strategies in ABX that I want to talk about. The first is building your account data foundation, the single view of the accounts. The second is then finding the accounts that really matter and prioritizing your time. Third is then engaging with those accounts with relevant personalized interactions across channels. Fourth is closing those deals by aligning with sales. And last but not least, every marketing process needs to talk about measurement. And so I'm going to dive into each of the 5 of these as we go through this presentation. And we'll use that fancy vortex transition you just saw, as well as a dad joke to highlight the end of each section. So build. This is about building the account-based foundation. And I alluded to this at the beginning when I said that trying to do an account-based strategy at Marketo was really painful. I drove my operations team crazy because we didn't have a single view of the account. The data we needed was, there was some data in our Marketo, there was other data in our CRM, but the leads didn't tie to the accounts. And there was other information, in our website, and then our reps weren't logging their emails. And all in, marketing and sales didn't have a shared view of what was going on. It was really hard to measure the results. And trying to actually run account-based campaigns with a lead-based system was hard. And so that's why we were inspired to start Engagio, to really solve the problem of creating that single view of the account. And so what this means is you want to, first of all, take all your first-party data, the campaigns, the leads, the contacts, the activities, everything in Salesforce, your web visits, your marketing automation programs. As I mentioned, the corporate email, there's so much valuable information about your accounts in those emails your reps are sending and receiving, as well as their meeting invites and the ad impressions. And you need to collect that all together and then match it, to the right account so that you can then have that single view of the account of your first party data. That's the stuff you own. And then you want to augment that with your third-party data. This is just information about accounts that maybe aren't even in your system. You know, what is their industry, their location, their size, and that kind of, how do they relate to each other, just to build out your database of accounts. If you're a tech company, technographics can be super important. What technologies does that company have installed? At Demandbase, we really care what marketing automation you have and what CRM you have. Knowing that tells us a lot about whether or not that account is likely to be a good fit for us. So we want to augment our first-party data with that. Intent data has become so important in the last few years. This is the ability to know what accounts are researching out on the open web and what are they showing signs of maybe being ready to be in market to buy. So you want to augment your data with that. Account identification is the ability to de-anonymize account and know, hey, this account, this person, this cookie on this web page is tied to that account. And last but not least, just context, filling out your database with the missing people for the key people personas at your key accounts, and then maintaining all that. So there's a lot of, frankly, infrastructure to build out the perfect single view of the account. You don't have to do this all at once, but it is the foundation to then everything else that we're going to be talking about. How do you find the accounts? How do you engage them? How do you measure them? So it is important to get started. Okay, so that was a pretty hefty, meaty section. So again, let's take a quick break for a dad joke. So many of you have heard this first joke. Why is 6 afraid of 7? Well, it's because 7 ate 9. The question that most people haven't heard is, why did 7 eat 9? And the answer is because you're supposed to eat 3 squared meals a day. Some of these got to think about. Okay, Vortex tells us we're moving on to the next section. How do we find the right accounts? So at any given point in time, for most companies, the number of accounts that you could be going after is a lot larger than the number you can actually go after given your resources. And so we find that there's sort of 2 strategies needed to focus really in on the best ones. The first one has to do with tiering your accounts into different styles. And the second is all about having a strategy to segment and kind of highlight focus on certain accounts at certain periods in time. So clicking into that first strategy of the different styles, there are really kind of 4 styles of ABX. At the top of the pyramid is one-to-one. This is your classic, truly bespoke style of account-based strategy, where you're going to do deep account research and then use that to create highly customized programs for each account. It is a lot of investment, and it's for very valuable accounts. Bev Burgess from the ITSMA talks about Accenture selling $500 million a year contracts. If you're doing a $500 million a year contract, you are definitely using this style of ABX. But typically, companies are going to use it for deals that are worth $2 million or more and spend up to $50,000 per account per year. And as a result, they're only going to have a handful of one-to-one accounts. The one-to-few style is more scalable. It lets you have more like 50 accounts, or overall, that might be worth, say, 250 to 2 million a year. And this is all about micro segments, picking groups of 15 to 20 accounts that have similar business challenges, doing deep research on that challenge of that cluster, and then creating highly focused programs with moderate account level personalization for each account. It's a lower level investment, but it's more scalable. And then continuing that spectrum, one-to-many. I see a lot of account-based programs live here because this is appropriate for deals of, say, $50,000 to $250,000 a year. A lot of companies sell deals in that size. You can have hundreds of these accounts, and you're going to use broader programs, less personalization, more technology to really reach these accounts. But it's still slightly more personalized than the bottom, which has not really any personalization. I just call that targeted demand generation to your ideal customer profile. Here you can have thousands of accounts, and it's probably appropriate for deals less than 50K. So an important point is just, mention that there's not one best style. One-to-one isn't better than the others. It's just about using the appropriate style for your deal sizes. What I've seen, though, is that companies tend to, no matter what style they're practicing, they tend to pick too many accounts in the higher styles, and therefore not be able to really deliver enough focus and personalization given the resources that they have. And so what I recommend is before you put your accounts into these styles, first sit down and define what I call the entitlements, which is how are we going to treat and interact with each account. And entitlements can fall into 4 major buckets. The first is data, which is just like, hey, how are you going to make sure you've got the right data for each account? And for a one-to-one, you might do a lot of really manual research and very careful data scrubbing, whereas you might just buy contacts for other styles. Second is advertising. How much will you spend on advertising to each account? Obviously, the more valuable account, the more budget you can apply. The third is direct mail. Whether or not, if you're going to use direct mail, obviously more valuable accounts can get more expensive, fancier, more personalized and customized direct mail. And then the fourth is just what we call high value offers. This might be a one-to-one meeting with your CEO or some other kind of very bespoke, customized, but not very scalable offer that you might make available. This is what they look like for demand base. So you can kind of just look through the one-to-one, the one-to-few, one-to-manys, and so on, some of the things that we might do. But this then leads us to the second strategy here that's at play, which is, we have some always-on entitlements, but then we also sometimes put extra focus on some accounts. And I'll show you some of the ways that we give extra focus in a minute. And that's going to add in the direct mail, the customized Cameo messages, some of that kind of stuff. So this is what entitlements look like for demand base. Once we've defined this, now we know exactly how many accounts we can have in each style. So for demand base, we've landed on 5 one-to-ones per rep, 30 one-to-fews per sales rep, and about 100 one-to-manys per sales rep. And then everything else in their territory that's a good fit falls into that fourth bucket. So now it's a process of going and identifying which account should fall into which bucket or style, if you will. And to do that, we use a methodology that we call FIRE. And this is really using AI and big data to sort of score the best accounts. So the F in FIRE stands for fit. This is a qualification score. How close is this account to our best accounts and our ideal customer profile? How potentially valuable is it to us? The I is intent. We talked about this. Does this account show interest in our products and our competitors? R stands for relationship. Do we have context or history with this account? Maybe we have somebody who was a customer at another account who has now moved into this account. Maybe we did a sales cycle with them a year ago, and they told us they're not ready now, but they're ready. They might be ready in a year. And then the E stands for engagement. And this is really time spent with us. Are they coming to our website, downloading our content, watching our webinars, things like that? So all of these are important. And we combine them at demand base into a fifth score that we call pipeline predict, which is really about, does this account show the pattern of behaviors that other accounts have shown as they were leading up to becoming an opportunity? And if so, that tells us, hey, this account's very likely to be hot and deserving of that extra focus. So now we've done all the work. Now we're ready to actually go pick the accounts. And at the top, you sort of see what we do is we give each sales rep a spreadsheet that has all the accounts in their territory. It has some key technographic and firmographic information. And then it has the FIRE score, as well as one that we can normalize and combine into a total. And then we sort. And then the rep gets to go in. And maybe they'll pick the top one, Bluth Company, as one of their one-to-ones. Maybe they won't. And that's really up to them. based on their understanding of their territory, because we want the sales team to feel like they've owned the process. Marketing is just guiding that with giving them the data. And on the bottom half of the slide here, you see some of those triggered ways we do extra focus. Maybe we're focusing this quarter on going after accounts that use a competitive solution or a particular industry, as well as triggered campaigns. Maybe we see an account having that high pipeline predict, which we call the MQA stage, or a new executive just got hired, or they're showing intent for competitor. Those can all trigger that extra focus. Okay, again, a lot more information about how we find the right accounts, group them into tiers, work with sales, and then trigger a specific focus. So let's take a dad joke break. So a sheepdog chased all the sheep into the pen, and then he went to the farmer and said, all 40 of the sheep are accounted for. And then the farmer said, but I only have 36 sheep. So the sheepdog replied, I know, but I rounded them up. All right, take a sip of coffee. Get a vortex. Now we're moving into how do we engage these accounts? We found them based on our account foundation. Now we actually want to interact with them. And the key to interacting with our accounts is that we need to be relevant. There's so much noise out there that if we are not relevant to these accounts, they're going to ignore us. But the good news is that a lot of research shows that executives will respond to unsolicited marketing materials if it contains ideas relevant to their business, where relevant is based on it's unique to their industry, their specific business, and it actually teaches them something to advance their business forward. And in order to be relevant, therefore, you need insights. You need data about the account. And so in some ways, this goes back to the account foundation. The more you know about the account, the more accurate you can be. So where is this account in its journey? If they're an early stage account, you're going to treat them differently than if they're in an active buying cycle. Are they showing intent? What are they showing intent on? If you know their specific keywords, you can be more relevant. They're getting their industry tells you how to be more relevant. Knowing what technologies they use can be more relevant. Knowing who their competitors are is a great way to be relevant, as well as other news triggers like new executive, new funding, all that kind of stuff. None of this has to be super hard. You can automate a lot of these insights, but collectively they drive relevance. And then the second piece of engagement is what channel should we actually use to interact with people? And so this is some data from Topo that sort of really shows the various ABX channels people are using. And there's really a couple buckets here. At the top, you see there's a fair number of, I would call, human interactions, where a person is reaching out. And that's so critical in any ABX strategy. Then you have things like direct mail, which are more, by definition, they're just not super scalable. When you send somebody a nice package, they know that you can't be sending that to $10,000 companies typically. And then lastly, that's complemented by scalable things like digital advertising and website personalization, which are also, important to kind of round out, the overall program. So digital advertising is one of the, if you look at sort of the percent using, it's the second most common channel companies are using, and it has very high satisfaction. And so I want to just spend a minute talking about the challenges of account-based advertising. Because you need to do two things. First, you need to optimize your spending across accounts. And this is harder than it sounds, because with a typical advertising solution that uses an off-the-shelf DSP, like Trade Desk or AppNexus or something like that, the number of impressions each account's going to get will be proportional to the number of cookies at that account or the number of people that account. And so imagine you're going after retailers and you've got Walmart and Land's End in the same campaign. Typically Walmart will then end up receiving a couple hundred times more impressions because it's got so many more employees. And that's not what you want. You might want Walmart to get a few more, but not hundreds of times more. And we see this when people use other account-based advertising solutions, the vast majority of the budget goes to just say the top 10% of accounts. And so if you really want to do account-based advertising well, you need a DSP that was built for B2B, which is really, allows you to pace the bidding, and make sure that the budget is allocated evenly across accounts. The second challenge of account-based advertising is making sure that you get your ads in front of the right people at that account. And that's often done by title targeting. I might say, I want VPs of marketing. The problem with that is that the data really sucks. And it's very hard to get good onboarding of sort of B2B data into these B2C DSPs. Plus, there's going to be lots of VPs of marketing that aren't relevant to me. And so what we find is that it's a lot better to do intent-based targeting and to really try to focus your bids onto the specific people who are the ones showing intent for your solution. We find that those people are much more likely to be part of your buying committee. So that's just a couple things to think about in the world of account-based advertising. But really, when it comes to engagement in ABX, it's not about any one channel. It's about making all the channels work together for maximum effectiveness. And this is where what's orchestration comes in. Think of orchestration as an orchestra conductor. And your direct mail might be your percussion, and your SDRs might be your string instruments, and your advertising might be your brass. And it's about making sure all of these channels work together in harmony to create a good customer experience, which ultimately will drive more overall response rates. So what I find is the best way to think about orchestration is to try to align your interactions to the account journey. And we talked about this just a little bit earlier. But you can take that same FIRE, F-I-R-E, and pipeline predict, and use it to understand where the account is in the buyer's journey. Here's what it looks like at demand base, although obviously you should customize the stages to match your own business. At the top, we've got the qualified stage. These are accounts that look like they're in our ideal customer profile. They have a good fit score, but they are otherwise not engaging with us. We want to go after them, but they don't even know who we are. Awareness is they're showing awareness for our category with intent. Engaged is now they're starting to engage with us. You can see how an account is deepening as they move through this. That MQA stage, this is what we call the marketing qualified account. That's obviously a play on the classic MQL. And this is that account showing that pipeline predict. Obviously from there we have opportunity, customer, and post-sale stages. So then the key is to align our interactions to the buyer's journey. So we have an account that's qualified. Again, we want to sell to them, but they don't even know who we are, or they're not even showing interest in our category. So here we're really going to just be focusing on building our brand, trying to create a foundation of trust so that when they are a little bit deeper into the process, they think positively. As they move into awareness and engaged, we're going to try to keep marketing to them and engaging with them. We'll move a little bit more towards logic from emotion with more thought leadership and education. And when that account hits that magic MQA, we think they're in market, they're showing intent. Now's the time that they might want to hear from a salesperson. Now we're going to actually reach out to them, but it won't be poking them with the spear. It's going to be using all the insights to be relevant, but also based at the right time. We're not going to stop there. Once it's an opportunity, we keep marketing to them. Here though, we want to be talking to the entire buying committee. The salesperson can't possibly be talking to 20 plus people in the buying group on a consistent basis, but marketing can. And we want to help to focus on, them joining up, thinking we're the right solution, and validating the decision they've made. And then obviously we continue post-sale to drive adoption and new expansion opportunities, and always based on insights to be relevant and trustworthy. So that's how you engage with your target accounts across channels in a relevant way. Some examples of plays that you might think about running. I'm not going to talk through every point on the slide here, but for an example, let's say that you have a target account. This is the fourth one here, that you see a key person for that account download some content or register for a webinar. Maybe what you do is you'd reach out to them personally and say, hey, you know, I saw you register for this webinar, but you're such a special person, special account. Why don't you take a one-to-one meeting with the webinar presenter so we can really dive deep into your specific issues and topics? That might be a cool thing you can do, again, for the right kind of value, you know, of account. You know, way down at the bottom, you might have the third to last one, stuck or lost opportunities that suddenly re-engage, you know, but sales hasn't been kind of following up on. Just a simple play is just alert the salesperson to kind of, you know, reactivate, or maybe you sort of bring in a new person to talk to them or a new channel just to kind of help re-engage that account and restart up a sales cycle. Okay. So we've got about 15 minutes left and we're right on track. So we have time for another dad joke. There's two here actually. So the first one is, what did the 0 say to the 8? Nice belt. What did the 8 say to infinity? Time to stand up and know your limits. Again, hopefully you enjoy these as much as I do. All right, vortex transition. We are on to working with the sales team, aligning with them to close deals. And the key point here is that the way marketing and sales are going to work and work together is going to change in an account-based strategy. And this is so critical to success. In the classic Marketo demand gen world, it was a baton handoff, where marketing would generate the lead, score it, and pass it to sales at the right time. Whereas in this new world, it looks more like a soccer or football team where you got players in different positions, but they're going to pass that ball back and forth as they move the ball up and down the field, knowing that that ball is not going to take a linear journey. So this sounds great, easier said than done for a lot of companies. So I want to talk about the 3 levels of alignment that you can sort of think about. The first level is just aligning your data. You know, and this is back to building that account foundation. If you've got the sales team logging into your CRM and looking at accounts while marketing is logging in and looking at leads, you're literally not on the same page. And so just providing sales with the ability to see the same data that marketing is looking at about accounts is just your step 1 foundation to making things work. From there, step 2 is to then start to proactively push alerts and insights to the sales team about things that will make them able to do their jobs better. And then the ultimate 3rd level is really starting to work like that coordinated soccer team. So on the second one, here's some examples of the kinds of things that we are using at Demandbase to alert our sales team. So if a target account visits the website, they're going to get a real-time Slack alert saying, hey, your account's on the site right now. Or maybe we might have a target account that downloads my new book or becomes ABM certified. Our sales reps might want to know that. Or if they have an open opportunity or renewal that starts showing intent for a competitor, they want to know about that, and so on. So identify the things your sales team wants to know and proactively alert them over email, over Slack, you know, whatever's the right channel to kind of proactively let them know. And then always, you know, once a quarter, check in and say, hey, are these alerts still useful? Are there any new alerts that you might want? And then in terms of the 3rd level, really working like a soccer team, you know, lots to say, but I think probably one of my most important tips is to just get started with what I call an ABX stand-up. And this is where you get, the picture literally shows too many people. You want just the marketer, the salesperson, and the SDR if you have one. You meet every 2 weeks for 15 minutes, and the only agenda items are to talk about that sales rep's accounts. What are they doing that might be relevant and interesting? And what are you going to collectively do to engage with that account and progress them down the journey? And it doesn't sound like rocket science because it isn't, but companies like Snowflake and Anaplan and Demandbase, we all use this. And I don't know of a single better strategy to drive sales and marketing alignment to really engage around your accounts. Okay, dad joke time. Why are parallel lines so tragic? They have so much in common, but they'll never ever meet. That's pretty tragic. Okay, final vortex transition, bringing us to measurement. How do we measure our account-based experience programs? And the key here is to understand that it's not about counting the people you reach, it's about reaching the people that count. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. Are you engaging with the right people at the right accounts? And so engagement is really a very key metric. You know, and sometimes that can be as simple as just web visits. You know, you set a baseline for how much web traffic are your target accounts, do you get from your target accounts? And then start your ABX programs and then measure, has that traffic gone up? You know, and how many accounts hadn't been to the website that are now coming to the website? That lift in web activity from your target accounts is a really good just first step of saying, hey, this stuff is working. From there, you can double click into engagement trends, you know, and are some channels engaging better than other? And where's the engagement coming from by persona, by segment, even by territory? And like really diving into all those engagement metrics can be a really valuable way of measuring your account-based success. The other way to measure your account-based success goes back to that account journey. You know, where you saw earlier where we defined the different stages of the account journey. This is actually a screenshot from the product, you know, and then for each stage, we look at these 4 V metrics. Value tells you how many accounts do you have in each stage as of right now. Volume is all about movement. How many accounts move from one stage to the next stage in a given month or quarter, for example. I'm cheating with conversion, but that's obviously, you know, what is the conversion rate from stage to stage? And then velocity tells you how fast it's moving. These are metrics we look at, you know, every week, every month, every board meeting to really understand how our account-based strategies are working to move accounts through the funnel. Okay, makes sense that we are in a measurement section. We're talking more about math. So the problem with math jokes or puns, which this presentation is full of, is that calculus jokes are derivative, algebra jokes are usually formulaic, and arithmetic jokes are pretty basic. And I can handle all that, but graphing is where I draw the line. Okay, home stretch here. I did just want to spend a minute talking about account-based technologies. And I need to start by saying ABX is not a technology. It is a business strategy. However, companies that do invest in account-based technologies tend to be more successful than those that don't. It's really a maturity curve. So there are lots of technology categories that fit under ABX. You know, this is sort of my own market map, if you will, where you can, you know, this technology to help you build your foundation, find the accounts that drive your business, engage across those different channels of understanding the accounts, personalizing your interactions, advertising, you know, interacting across different channels, and orchestration, closing, and measurement. And this can feel a little overwhelming to people, but this is where the rise of account-based platforms have become so important, where you can invest in one technology that's going to bring, frankly, a lot of the key pieces together to help you do all these things, you know, and that's the extent of my little sales pitch for Demand-Based One today. If you are sort of, you know, thinking about where else to start, this data from Topo can also help, you know, in terms of looking at investments that look at satisfaction versus impact. Account-based platforms are at the top, but there's 2 sort of easier things you can start with. One is just lead to account matching, forming that the first step of building that foundation of matching leads to accounts, and then account-based advertising, which leads me really to my very, very last point, which is I've covered a lot of information today about how to, you know, what ABX looks like when you're really, really rocking and rolling at it. And you should think big, but you should also start small and move quickly. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. This doesn't have to be a major transformational effort. There are baby steps you can take to get started. And the first one is just picking your accounts. If you haven't already done this, go identify, you know, find out who are the accounts in your ideal customer profile. Even if you have done that, you know, just doing some basic prioritization by intent to get your focus onto those best accounts is a really, really good kind of just first step. From there, pilot account-based advertising. This is such an easy on-ramp because it doesn't change how you're doing other things. It doesn't have to change how marketing and sales work together. You're probably already spending some money on advertising. This is just a great way to focus those dollars onto the accounts that really, really matter without a lot of effort. And then the third is that lead to account matching. If you don't have some sort of account data infrastructure in place, this can be your very, very first step. As I said at the top, all this and more is covered in my book, The Clear and Complete Guide to Account-Based Experience. So get your copy at demandbase.com/guide. And we will wrap with one last dad joke. This one's perhaps my favorite because I do have teenagers. Why do teenagers travel in groups of 3s and 5s? Well, the answer is because they can't even. And with that, you're the best. Thank you.